Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, that is Learn with Shaveta Malhotra. In Java, the OOPS concept have different type of variables, and today we will discuss about the first type, that is instance variable. And this is the very important concept about the variables in OOPS, instance variable. So instance variables are also known as the properties, or you can say fields in OOPS concept. Whenever in a class you create any variable, the specific position, and that is known as the properties of an object, or we can say fields or instance variable. Correct? Now, let's discuss all these points one by one, and we'll also implement all these things, and we'll check like how we can create the instance variable, where we can use that, and why we use such kind of the instance variables. So first point is, this is known as the object level variable, but we will discuss in detail like why we known as the object level variable. If you're talking about the global variable, so as we know, the global mean to say where we can use those variables anywhere, right? It's having the scope anywhere, like inside the class, outside the class, in the inherited class, you can access such kind of variables anywhere. So these are known as the global variables, where the scope is not limited to the only block, limited to the only methods. So moving to the next one, that is declaration, like where we can declare such kind of variables. So in that case, what would be the position of the instance variable? So instance variable we can create inside the class and outside the method. Now here you can see there is no error, we are not assigning any value to this variable, so this is known as the instance variable, right? Now the next point is the initialization, because whenever you create any variable inside this block and later on you are using this variable, so it's give us the compilation error because it's mandatory to initialize this variable. In this case of instance variable, there is no need to initialize the variable, and that will not throw any compilation error. We will discuss. So as of now, just you can understand, no need to initialize such kind of the variables, because JVM itself assigns some default values to these variables according to their data type. For example, if we are creating any integer type variable, so by default its value would be 0. If you are creating any float type variable, so by default it will assign 0.0 f float value. If you are creating any double type variable d, and the JVM will assign 0.0 as a default value. In case of string, that will assign null value. Or you can say if you are creating any instance of the object, that will by default assign the null value. Whenever we create an object of a class. That's why it is known as the object level variables, because the default values or the memory allocation happens when we create an object of a class, right? Now, if you're talking about the accessibility, like how we can access those variable, in which area, how we can print those values. So let's see, if I want to print the value of I variable by just directly writing the I, so it is giving me one error. And what it is saying this is non-static field I can't be referenced from the static context. What does it mean? We can't use or access these instance variable in the static area directly, because these are the instance level variables and its value or the memory will be assigned at the time of object creation. So in that case, we need to create an object of a class. We can't access these variables directly. So how we can access such kind of variables in the static method or in the static area? So we need to create an object of a class. Now, how we can create an object? So to create an object of a class, the syntax is the class name. Here you can write any variable name using new keyword and again class name, round bracket and semicolon. So here we are creating an object of class. And now if you want to access all these instance global variables, so with the help of this obj dot I, you can access the property of a class. Correct? Only in that case if you are accessing these variables in static area. If you have to access these variables in the non-static area mean to say those method which doesn't have any static keyword, then you can access those things directly. You can access these variables directly. Don't worry, we will discuss that thing also. So as of now, in the static method, we can access such kind of variables with the help of class object, but we can't access it directly. Correct? So how we can create an object? Create the object of a class by using the new keyword, and with the help of that object you can access this variable. And now how we can prove that by default the value of I variable is 0? Let me just execute the code, and in the console you can see the value of I would be 0. See? Because as of now we haven't initialized that variable. But of course, if you are assigning some value to this variable, and it will assign the 10 value to I and will print 10 value. Correct? And if let's suppose for this, let's say for the st, again let me just print all these variables just to clarify like which type of the value that is assigning. So whenever we are printing these variables, and here you can see the 10 0.0 0.0 and the default value of string is null. But yes, if you want to assign some specific value to these variables within the static area, so the main rule is again same, just you need to access those variables with the help of object of a class, and here you can assign some value. And now if I execute the code, now its new value would be test, and it is printing test value. Correct? So in that case, there is no need to initialize such kind of variables, but if you want to initialize those variables in the static area, so firstly you have to access that variable with the help of object of a class, and then you can assign the value and print the value of that variable. Correct? Now the next point is how we can access these instance variable in the non-static method. Now what is the static and non-static method? That is the complete concept we will discuss in the upcoming videos, like what are the static or the non-static methods and static keyword. So as of now, just you can understand the static method, the method which is having static keyword, non-static method which doesn't have static keyword, right? So here I'm creating one user defined method, non-static method, and the first letter of method always should be in lowercase. The first letter of the class name always should be in uppercase. So now the thing is, we want to access these variables in the non-static method. We can say this is non-static method, and how we can access that? Let me just print all these things here, and there is no need to use any obj. You can access it directly. And if you want to assign the value to this variable, again there is no need to use any obj or any object. It will directly accessible. Correct? But as of now, if I execute the code, it will not print all these values. Reason being, because firstly we need to call this method, but again that is another concept how we can call the method. So as of now, just you can understand, in the non-static method there is no need of any object. You can access all these variables directly. So here I have also written the class, we can access the directly within the same class. Correct? Now the next one is the value of instance variable varies as we create the different number of objects of a class. That is the most important point, because whenever you're working on the real-time projects and we need to think about, like here we have to use the instance variable or the static variables or the local variable, so definitely that concept is really important, and this point is also really important, like the value of instance variable varies as we create the different number of objects. So let's understand what does it mean. To understand the concept of like how the value of instance variable vary as we create the different number of object. Now, for example, we have one instance variable. So instance variable is like we are creating inside the class and outside the method, and initially we are assigning some value that is 10. Correct? So in that case, whenever you are creating an object of a class, that means here we have obj1, obj2 and obj3. And for each and every object, it creates the, for example, for the obj1, here the value I is equal to 10. This is the one separate copy of I variable for the obj1, correct? For the obj2, again there is one separate copy, I is equal to 10. For the object 3, the value of I is equal to again 10. Now, if the obj1 is trying to change the value of variable I from 10 to 20, so this value will be changed only for obj1. It won't be changed for the obj2 and obj3, because this is for each and every instance. If the value of I is equal to 10 for the obj1 and it has changed the value from 10 to 20 by using obj1 dot I is equal to 20, so for these objects the value of I is still 10, so value of I is also 10 for object 3, until unless that value is not changed by object 2 and 3. Correct? For example, for the obj2, it has decided to change the value of I by 40. So now the obj2, if you are printing sys2, obj1 dot I or obj2 dot I or obj3 dot I. So for this one, the value of I would be 20 because it has changed the value from 10 to 20. Correct? Obj2 has changed the value from 10 to 40. So if you are printing obj2 dot I, the value would be 40. And in case of obj3, it hasn't changed the value, so in that case the value would be still 10. So you can understand this concept like with the real life example. Let's suppose there is one teacher, right? And there are a number of students. And the teacher has distributed the paper to the student 1, to the student 2, because there are the different copies, student 3, and assign the paper to the student 4. If the student 1 is marking something or writing something on the paper, that doesn't impact on the rest of the papers which is distributed to the other students. That means each and every student having the different copy of that paper. Correct? This concept basically we utilize when in the Selenium, in the automation testing, we perform the parallel execution. So over there, just you need to think about like where we have to use the instance variable. So let's execute the code in editor. So here I have created the 3 objects of class, that is instance variable, and having the one variable I, that is instance variable with value 10, right? So now if we print this variable for all the objects for the obj1, obj2 and obj3. So here you can see the value of I will remain same for all these 3 objects. So now if let's say the obj1 has decided to change the value of variable I by using obj1 dot I is equal to 900. Now in that case, will it change the value of I for obj2 and obj3? So let's execute the code and see. Now here you can see the value of I for obj1 is 900, and for obj2 and obj3 the value is still 10. That means, so value of instance variable varies as we create the different number of object of a class. So you're working on the real project, just you have to think about like here we have to use the instance variable or the static variable. If you're creating the n number of objects and the value of instance variable is different for each and every object, and then in that case definitely you have to create the instance variable. Okay. And the next point is why instance variables are known as the object level variables, because the value of these variable gets initialized or assigned at the time of object creation, right? As we know that the JVM always starts the execution from the main method, that method which is having the static keyword and all these string type arguments. So here, as we create an object of a class, so JVM will assign the default values to these instance variable and also allocate the memory to these variables, right? So that's why this is known as the object level variable. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Take care.